Well, Dolphin fans, welcome back to another edition of Dolphins In Depth, the podcast provided to you by the Miami Herald. And I know this is the end of the first week of free agency. We are now entering the second tier, the tier 2 players, the roughly minimum to $2 million salary players. And I realize some of you are upset. I know Barry Jackson, who is joining me right now, is not very fond of what has happened from a free agent standpoint. However, let me put it to you this way, Barry. If I said to you at the beginning, before free agency started, the Dolphins would have roughly $28 million in free agent money, and they would be fiscally responsible with their decision-making, prudent with their offers, and patient with the talent that they added, your reaction would have been what?
I would have been somewhat disappointed. And this is kind of a nuanced discussion, Omar. In some ways, I think we can commend the Dolphins. They found a very good guard in James Daniels at a fraction of the price that it cost other teams to sign guards of this quality, like Aaron Banks, Will Fries. So give them credit for that. They found a very affordable number 3 receiver with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who had 9 touchdowns last year. Give them credit for that. I think they've upgraded a little bit online blocking tight end with Pharaoh Brown today. Alexander Madison, the running back, has not averaged even 4 yards per carry the last 4 years, but he is very good in short yardage.
Allegedly.
Short yardage numbers in his career. And the 2 safeties they signed have upside. So in that regard, I say give them credit. However, to say that this week has been not mildly disappointing, I think would not be genuine, because they end the week. We're taping this at midday Friday, so they're close to the end of the week with not having addressed cornerback, which is a vital need on this team. You have only 2 veterans with Jalen Ramsey, Kader Kohu. The top 25 corners are off the board. I just posted a story on MiamiHerald.com about what's left at cornerback, and it's not very good. Only 6 free agent corners left who started at least 7 games last year. All of them have blemishes. Mike Hilton, the slot corner, might be the best of that group. Jeff Okudah, Asante Samuel, probably the biggest name. So I'm deeply concerned about corner. And then obviously, Omar, as we know, with defensive line, yes, you have to be patient because they're waiting on a decision from Calais, which is the right thing to do. But the fact they haven't addressed nose tackle, they lost Deshaun Hand. So I think those 2 positions stand out, and you can't be happy. And it's hard not to be concerned with those 2 key positions. Am I being a little too negative?
You just glossed all over the fact that Miami Dolphins signed Liam Eichenberg. Barry?
Yes, which I'm sure thrilled the fan base. So I think this whole thing with Liam was overstated last night. I think you and I would be surprised if he's starting on opening day. The only scenario I think where he starts is if James Daniels, God forbid, has a setback with his Achilles, and his representative told me he's expected back to be cleared for football in May or June, on track to play this year. The Dolphins have examined his medicals, but we both think that they're going to bring in another guard, whether it's a veteran on a minimum, whether it's Kelvin Banks or Membu or Tyler Booker at pick 13. I'd be surprised if Liam starts. I don't know what the whole hullabaloo is about re-signing Liam Eichenberg as a backup.
Hold on.
Number 3 guard, it's not the end of the world.
Here's and it was so bad yesterday I had to get off Twitter. And I'm very proud of the Dolphins because they put out this anti-bullying PSA this morning using some of the players who've been bullied, Julian Hill particularly, by the fan base. And I would argue to you, Barry, right now, and not all of this is his fault, but I would tell you that Liam Eichenberg is probably the 5th most hated Dolphins player in Dolphins history.
Sammy Smith has to be number 1. So you're putting who 2 to 4? It's a great question. I haven't given it a lot of thought.
Deion Jordan's got to be up there. There are some particular players like Jabril Wilson that I'm really not a big fan of. That a lot of Dolphin fans probably forgotten all about him. This was a guy who was horrendous and blamed everybody but him. On a really big contract, by the way, that the Dolphins were just like, we'll eat the money. This guy's so horrible. I'm just saying he's in the top 5. And here's my thing about Liam. 52 starts. He started at every single position on the offensive line, primarily because he's not good at any one of them. Backup centers are hard to find in the NFL. And I will say this to you. If your backup center goes down, if your center goes down, generally season over, right, Barry?
Yeah, you're right. It's a very tough position to replace. He gives you at least someone reliable at backup center. But then why did they invest a spot on the 53 all year in Andrew Meyer?
It doesn't matter. Let Myers compete. I mean, I hear where you're going here, but we all know Liam Eichenberg is a better center than Andrew Meyer. And I am not advocating for Liam to be re-signed. One, I'm not going to judge the deal until I know the specifics of the deal. It's a 1-year deal. That's all we know. 1 year, $2 million. I don't have a problem. 1 year, $3. Now, if it's more than 3, like what the hell are you doing? Because that's $3 million of cap space. That's just absolutely eaten up. You could go sign a real good player for $3 million. In cap space, not real money, in cap space. Here's my thing about Liam. I really wanted him to leave. Not because of the play, the ability, the person. I know all of those things are, I can't say good,
decent.
Adequate.
Right.
But he needed a fresh start. He needed to go somewhere where the fan base doesn't hate him. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. The fan base looks at Liam as the reason why the whole season sucked last year. And while it was not all his fault, he was a significant contributor to it. And they're thinking, well, we didn't address guards because we're being cheap. And here we go re-signing Liam Eichenberg. What are we doing? Fans just shut down. And yeah,
I understand the reaction, Omar. I think it's overstated. I think this will end up being a footnote in the Dolphins offseason unless James Daniels is injured early in the year and Liam is forced into action, or unless Aaron Bruner is injured. I just don't see him being a major component of this team next year, barring injuries. And let's be clear about this. He's obviously inadequate as a run blocker. Couldn't move anyone. So in that regard, he needed to be replaced at right guard.
That's not fair. Early in the season, before he suffered his shoulder injury, he was adequate. He was okay. Yes. There were that 4-game stretch where they were running for 150 yards. Liam was doing some work. Liam was putting in some work.
But he and Rob Jones and Aaron Brewer, none of them were adequate run blocking, runs up the gut, runs between the tackles over the last 8 weeks of the season. So that's very true about Liam. He's on the ground too much. No one can argue that. I would say this about Liam as far as re-signing him, why I don't have an issue with it. Gave up only 2 sacks as a full-time starter last year. That's good for a starting right guard. He did give up 29 pressures, but that was not in the 20 worst among guards in the league. So the 2 sacks is not awful. He comes to work every day with a lunch pail, as they say. He's a good team guy. He can play 5 positions. We know, and I know he can't play 5 positions well, but he can play 5 positions. We know how much the Dolphins value that. So to me, if it's a minimum deal or very close to it, I have no issue with it. I don't think Liam Eichenberg is coming back as a starter. I think this was much ado about nothing last night, and I think it was just a way for fans to vent about their frustration with not winning a playoff game in 25 years and Chris Greer being GM for life and all of those things. I think Liam was the conduit to be able to lash out against all of that. So I'm not too concerned about Liam. But what about, I got to ask you this, I'm dying to know what you think of it. I know a little bit from your column, Zach Wilson. So you have 1 year to get it together, and you're telling me you're going to trust Zach Wilson, who has one of the worst passer ratings in modern NFL history, one of the biggest NFL draft busts of the past 15 years. You're going to trust him over a mediocre but established backup in the market like Gardner Minshew, Taylor Heineke, Jimmy Garoppolo, Marcus Mariota. Was this a prudent decision, or is this a risk that was totally unnecessary?
Here's some context that I've been told that puts some of this into proper perspective. One, quarterbacks have to learn a new offense, and it's not like they can just go in there and just, I can learn 20 plays and I'm good. So most of them don't want to keep learning new offenses. So they generally stick to the offenses that they're familiar with, which includes Zach Wilson, because he came from the Jet system that runs a similar offense. But here's my thought process on Zach Wilson. and as I wrote in the column. Let me finish that thought. Marcus Mariota got $9 million. I'm not paying Marcus Mariota $9 million to be mediocre. Gardner Minshew.
Matt Jones. Matt Jones was the other name where obviously his money from San Francisco was.
I picked Zach Wilson. I picked Zach Wilson over Mac Jones. I do.
Interesting.
And keep in mind, Mac Jones has probably targeted the 49ers because remember, there was talk about him being the second overall pick. Now, could we have a Trey Lance, Kyle Wilson debate? We probably could. And I think Trey Lance still hasn't found work. Other guys chose not to be here. When you have an organization on a one-year deal, and I think that this is a running theme in free agency where people have to realize players see and know, and agents see and know what's going on. Everybody knows everybody around here is on the hot seat. And so do you want to really come into an environment if the money isn't absolutely enticing and this isn't a home? Maybe you come here for Anthony Weaver. Do you come here for Mike McDaniel? Really?
Well, I think you come here for money, for the lack of state income taxes, wanting to live in Miami.
Yeah. But that's when you're older, Barry. That's when you're older. I think they'll be hot in the market for the older crowd when we hit to tier 3 of free agency. The guys are just looking for work. And, hey, come on down. Everybody for the minimum. I think they'll be real hot in that market. But a guy like Zach Wilson, did they overpay him? Absolutely. I did some Twitter assistance, got the salaries for the backup quarterbacks, and Zach Wilson is now a top 5 paid backup quarterback in the NFL based on the contract that the Dolphins signed. To me, that's crazy talk, but it shows how much they wanted him. However, it does trouble me that he only signed a 1-year deal. If you really believed in him and you really liked him for developmental purposes, we could sign a 2-year fake second-year deal. Either Zach Wilson was absolutely against it, or wink, wink, Barry, depending on where you go, your next situation, you might want to take him with you.
I want to just get quickly to my thoughts on Wilson. I understand where you're coming from. What troubles me is in a year where you should leave nothing to chance, with jobs on the line for coaches, with results needing to be made and clear progress needing to be made in year 7 of this rebuild or whatever you want to call it, I just don't like leaving my team's hopes within the hands of a guy who's got a 73.2 career passer rating, more interceptions than touchdowns, and several clear flaws that are obvious to everyone in his game. He has happy feet. He doesn't go through progressions quickly enough. Sometimes he goes through them too quickly and misses open guys. Accuracy is a question, 57% career. So among active quarterbacks who've started at least 15 games, Omar, only Anthony Richardson has a worse passer rating than Zach Wilson and Mike White. And those are the two guys you're telling me that they picked. Now, give them credit for Bridgewater, give them credit for Tyler Huntley, but their main free agent offseason backup quarterback options 2 of these years were Wilson and White, statistically 2 of the 3 worst modern NFL quarterbacks who have made at least 15 starts. I just don't see the need to gamble on someone, yes, has upside, has a cannon for an arm, but what's the need to gamble when you have a quarterback who's not durable? And frankly, I'd be ripping the decision more if there were better options in free agency. At least you can say, well, Mariota isn't great. Mac Jones isn't great. Garoppolo is older and isn't great. Minshew obviously is error prone. So it's not like they passed on somebody great. That's why I'm not calling this an egregious mistake, Omar. But I do think it's a mistake because you need someone more proven, I think, in that role behind Tua at least.
Let me put it to you this way. Just hear me out. Think about this thought process here. What's the easiest way to become a head coach in the NFL, Barry?
By showing that you can fix quarterbacks or fix offenses and make them productive.
Okay. Mike McDaniel's already shown you he could fix Tua, right? Tua was broken, he fixed him. What happens if he does it for a second quarterback?
Then he's even more of a genius. Even more of a genius. Loses the job here.
There'll be people in line to come get him to come fix the quarterback as the offensive coordinator or whatnot. Same thing with Darren Bevel. I think a lot of these people, coach, that's the one thing I've always realized. Coaches have huge egos. And they see talent and they say, I could fix that. And I think Mike McDaniel is looking at Zach Wilson and he's saying, there's the arm, there's the mobility. I need to fix his processing. I need to fix his happy feet. I need to dial back some of this gunslinger mentality. Put him in my offense, have him learn it, have him execute it. I fix him. He helps me win. Let's say he starts 5 games, helps me go 3-2. I'm back in the head coach seat somewhere else if things go left here.
Right. I think that's unlikely to happen. I mean, Sean Payton thought that Jarrett Stidham was better as his number 2 quarterback than Zach Wilson. Jarrett Stidham, an NFL journeyman, and he wanted to re-sign Stidham this offseason. They were happy to let Wilson go. So what is that?
An NFL journeyman that supposedly does a lot of the legwork and homework for opposing quarterbacks. I've heard that about Stidham, especially over the years, because I've always wondered, why does this guy keep getting jobs? And the Josh McCowns of the world, those guys are on tremendous fast tracks to become coaches, gurus. And if I'm Stidham, I'm staying right there with Sean Payton, because in a year or two, I'll become New Orleans head coach, tiny little quarterback from Boise State. I know everything but his name. New Orleans' head coach.
Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, who they signed from the Eagles.
Yes.
Right.
So Stidham, if you've got a young quarterback, he already has a veteran that's helping him. You don't need a number 3, but let's not pretend like Zach Wilson. Let's not pretend like the Dolphins just gave Zach Wilson this money because they felt like it. No, there clearly must have been other bidders, because he got nice money. So somebody had to be enticed, and I know Denver gives Zach Wilson very high praises. So they kept him on the 53 all year. That's hard to do in this NFL climate. What the Zach Wilson signing does mean to me, Barry, is that we likely won't be drafting a quarterback. And you know why we won't be drafting a quarterback? Because you do not have the development time to develop 2 quarterbacks, especially when, from what I hear, Tua monopolizes about 80% of the practice snaps. And
right.
to run.
And frankly, they've left themselves with so many needs in free agency. They don't even have the luxury of taking quarterback in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round. And there isn't going to be anyone at 13 unless Shedeur Sanders shockingly slipped, which isn't going to happen.
No, Shedor's going to be there. Shedor's going to be there at 13. Barry, Shedor's going to be there at 13.
No,
I promise you, Shedor's going to be there at 13. They're not going to take him, but he's.
I'd be shocked by that, Omar. I think with quarterback needy teams, someone's going to take Sanders earlier.
There aren't any quarterback
Sanders is going top 10. Mark my words, and you can put this on All Takes Exposed if Shedeur Sanders is still there at pick number 11. I want to tell you a couple more things on Zach Wilson. Just looking at his metrics, I studied that this week. He was one of the worst NFL quarterbacks the last 4 years in intermediate throws. 11 to 19 yards, horribly inaccurate. Deep throws, terrible, which is shocking because of his arm strength. Now, he did lead the league in 2022 in yards per reception, which was largely a function of he did complete a few deep balls and he was inaccurate on so many passes. I guess that that factored in as well with his average. He just had a limited number of completions.
Fix the footwork, he'll be fine. But hold on, Barry. In his defense,
there's so much else to fix. I don't think the Dolphins have the time to do it.
Barry, in his defense, a guy who is arguably going to be the greatest quarterback of all time in Aaron Rodgers also stunk with the Jets. So don't put that all on Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers also stunk with the Jets, and he is a Hall of Famer. Teams are still lining up to get his old behind. Don't put that on Zach Wilson. I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's absolutely fixable. We will see.
I'm giving him a pass because there was nothing great in free agency. It's not like they passed up in your prime Joe Flacco. Obviously, the Flacco who's been available is the one who threw 280 interceptions in his chance with the Colts last year. So because of the fact they didn't pass on anyone great, Mariota's obviously been very checkered. Minshew throws a lot of picks too. Because of that, I'm not going to rip him for Zach Wilson. Wouldn't have been my first choice, but I don't think it's egregious. To me, what worries me 4 days into free agency is I'm just stunned. No cornerback. I'm stunned because how many times has Chris Greer told us you can never have enough defensive backs? And I know there's 6 months till the season, and I know guys will shake free, and I know you can still get a James Bradbury off an Achilles or a Mike Hilton who's competent in the slot and move Kohu outside, or an Asante Samuel, or a Jeff Okudah, who obviously has not been very good, or a C.J. Henderson, another guy who's been a first-round draft bust, or Rasul Douglas, who was not good for Buffalo last year and remains unsigned even though he's a proven guy. So you'll be able to find one of those, but I would have wanted the money on a top guy, and you had the ability to do it, Omar Kelly. You could have cleared out $19 million with Tua, and you chose not to do it, which you could say is being responsible, or you could say, well, they kept themselves from getting a couple of high-end starters.
Yeah, you could have cleared out $24 million. Jordan Brooks is the easy restructure as well, but I think you saved those for emergency situations. You saved those in case George Kittle just so happens to become dislodged with the 49ers, and you can go get him for a second-round pick. You save those for instances where Calais Campbell says, I got a $6 million deal from the Baltimore Ravens, and you need to instantly find some damn money, Barry. You're patient. Now, have they addressed everything? No. Nose tackle is still a big problem. You need 2. They have 0. You still, I'm not really comfortable with the inside linebacker situation. Yes, they signed Terrell Dodson. Clap it up, because I did not expect him to return. I thought he'd get better money elsewhere. Obviously, teams were not enticed by his 100 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Okay, you bring him back here to develop. The issue I do have with that is Jordan Brooks and Terrell Dobson are very redundant players. They are the same player. And I think you need a inside linebacker with run stuffing, sniff it out instincts. I don't necessarily see that there. Now, could they change the roles and put Brooks in that inside linebacker role and have Dodson be the weak side linebacker? Maybe. We shall see. Safety. It's okay. I'm sorry, but you're not going to sell me 2 backup NFL journeymen who are young, developmental pieces as the heir apparent and the next great Dolphin safety duo. That's got to be addressed, Barry. I'm still addressing it in free agency. There's still some good, talented, older, more mature free agents out there. You give me Simmons. You give me Quandre Diggs. Somebody's got to teach these young players how to actually play the position.
I guess Elijah Campbell's going to be teaching them, right? He's a grizzled veteran in the room, despite the lack of defensive snaps. Yeah, at the moment, it's Campbell, it's Patrick McMorris, it's Melifonwu, obviously the Detroit player who signed, and Ashton Davis, who, to his credit, somehow has managed 8 interceptions despite starting fewer than 25 NFL games in 5 years for the Jets. So my issue, Omar, with safety is this. You've invested in 2 young guys who do have upside, but with injury histories. Melifonwu, injured reserve 5 times in 4 years. I wrote this in a column on MiamiHerald.com yesterday, how Greer still keeps gravitating to players with a long list of injuries. I don't understand. And then Ashton Davis on injured reserve 3 times. So the 2 of them, they're both in their mid-20s. The 2 of them have missed a combined 47 NFL games. Plus, neither is an established NFL starter. There is upside with both. They played well at times when they have played. So I like it from that standpoint. Also, they're both cheap, with $3 million for Melifonwu, less than that for Ashton Davis. However, I see this playing out this way. I think the Dolphins will stubbornly try to go with youth in the early stages of the offseason program, see what they have, and then it's going to be maybe like Atlanta last July, where they called Justin Simmons, say, will you join us late? We need a veteran safety. Maybe that plays out again this year, whether it's with Justin Simmons or one of these other veteran safeties that falls through the crack, but they clearly want to see what they have with the 4 young guys. They like McMorris. Obviously, Anthony Weaver, when he told us last year in September, he brought up Elijah Campbell's name and said, don't sleep on Elijah Campbell. It became clear they like his upside. They gave him 76 snaps late in the season and 3 safety looks with Jordan Poyer, who obviously remains unsigned, and with Javon Holland, who's going to the Giants. So should they have addressed safety already with a high caliber, highly paid player?
No. I'm still with safety with cornerback. I can be patient. There's going to be veterans out of work looking for employment that will sit there and accept a 1-year, $4 million deal. And I hate to say this on this podcast. I've talked to Xavier. Xavier wants to play in the NFL. He's not going to pick. He's going to be choosy. People were like, well, he didn't play last season. That was a choice. That was a personal choice. He got invested in his family, picking up his kids every day. Sometimes when players leave the game and they find out what other life is and they start setting up businesses and they start setting up their life and they start being more interactive with their kids, they don't want to go back to the grind. Now, especially when they don't need the money. Now, does he miss the game? Absolutely. And he'll find work. He'll find work. And it's not going to be for massive money, but he'll find work. There are tons of Stephon Gilmores out there.
Well, I would say at this point, Omar, it's a limited amount. I'm going to give you the names of veteran established starting quarterbacks. Tell me who makes your toes tingle, to quote the late, great Jim Mandich. Asante Samuel played only 4 games last year because of injury. Visited the Arizona Cardinals.
I could reclaim. I could polish him up. I like Samuel's name. Asante Samuel Sr.
Obviously he's got fanfare. He also had 122 pass rating against for Buffalo last year. James Bradbury, second-team All-Pro as recently as 2022, missed all of last year with a torn Achilles, has been a good player in this league for Philly and others. James Bradbury. Gilmore, you mentioned Stephon Gilmore, age 34, started 15 games for Minnesota last year, 94 passer rating against. Mike Hilton, very competent, but only 5'9" nickel corner, you Kohu outside. C.J. Henderson, talked about him, 107 passer rating against for Carolina last year. Ronald Darby's been around, not very good as a starter for Jacksonville last year. Darryl Worley was frequently exposed as a starter for Tennessee last year. Then there's Jalen Mills, a former corner who was an effective safety for the Jets last year. Cam Sutton, Akello Weatherspoon, Dane Jackson, Fabian Moreau, also out there. And 2 last names for you. Jeff Okuda, I should say, obviously. Former high first-round pick of Detroit, has been as much of a bust as any corner that we've seen this side of Noah, even worse than Noah.
Oh, yeah.
At least he salvaged his career in Washington. Last year, 6 games for Houston, 140 passer rating allowed. I would rule him out. And Tre'Davious White, who obviously has bounced around since his success in Buffalo, obviously on the downside of his career, 123 passer rating against for the Chargers and Bills last year. That's it. Now, there are a couple other guys that are marginal starters like Arthur Millette, who was released by Baltimore. But, Omar, that is the list of what's left. 32 corners of higher quality have signed elsewhere, and you've got to find a third corner among that group or the draft or anyone who shakes free in July, who's cutting good corners. This is why this is my number one worry.
People cut good corners.
Free agency.
People cut good corners, Barry. They'll draft to cut some corners. I'm sorry, Barry. I'm not when we did the show last week, I told you I'm being patient at cornerback. I'm
somewhat panicking at corner. I'm not panicking anywhere else because until we have an answer from Calais, I wouldn't panic on defensive line because you can get a nose tackle at the minimum who at least is passable. Ooh, if you consider Benito Jones passable last year, you can get a quality or decent player.
Barry,
a decent player that level. John Jenkins type. Raekwon Davis is
okay. Let me throw you some names. Let me throw you some names, Barry, because you like to throw me some names. No, damn it. Yes, I was writing them down. Because I'm looking now. Yeah, John Jenkins.
John Jenkins back for an 800th time. It's so funny. Not only has he played for the Dolphins multiple times, but they brought him back last year to visit, and then sign him.
He lives here. He wants to. He lives here. He wants to play.
He
lives here. He calls this home. Miami is always going to be home. John is a great locker room guy. If that's the decision they go, I'm all for it. 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Armani Watts. Linval Johnson, Raekwon Davis, Linval Joseph, Raekwon Davis, your friend, best BFF, and my BFF, Jordan Phillips, still out there. He's a little bit more mature at 32. Now, will he put in full effort? No. Jerry Tillery, that's the one who I actually like the most.
Yeah,
he's 28. He's 28.
Charger. Yep.
Yeah. But
yeah, you're right. I'm not concerned about that. And again, I want to draw the distinction about why I'm a little panicky at corner, but not defensive line, even though the only established
it's
defensive
harder
line
to
is the
find
contract
nose
is
tackle
Sealer.
than it is to find cornerbacks, Barry. I could
No,
go.
I'll tell you why there's a difference. I'll tell you why there's a difference in my mind. On defensive line, even though Sealer is the only established one under contract, I take some comfort in the fact that Calais is considering a return. And any of the names that you just mentioned at defensive tackle, you could get any of them at low money at any time. So that's why I'm not panicked about defensive line. The only position I am panicked about is corner, because I just read you the list of what's left,
Barry,
and
I
there's
could go draft
practically
too.
nothing good left. Mike Hilton, I think, would be fine. Maybe Asante Samuel, but there's nothing good left, and you
Barry.
need corners in a pass-heavy league. That's why
Barry.
I'm somewhat panicked about corner. Why is that
Barry.
unreasonable?
Listen, Barry, I can go draft cornerback. If I found 3 undrafted cornerbacks that have played in the NFL, in Nick Needham, Ethan Bonner,
Now's the quarter talk.
Cater Court, 4. If I found 4 undrafted guys, what do you think the effort I could do if I actually put, other than Cam Smith, if I actually put some effort into, drafting and selecting a cornerback?
Well, they tried with drafting, and they haven't had success with Noah and Cam Smith. They've been very good in the undrafted free agent cornerback market, as every Dolphins fan knows. But leaving corner to the draft when there aren't a lot of high-end corners, certainly in Miami's range at number 13, I just think is a huge mistake. That's the one position so far. I think it was a mistake not to spend money.
I am not panicking, Barry. You know how many guys play cornerback in college football? 5 a team. There will be opportunity. You will get – there are probably 50 cornerbacks in this draft who will be playing in the NFL. I'm not saying that they're going to be good. Whoever lines up against Jalen Ramsey is going to be heavily targeted. I could go sign an Eli Apple tomorrow, Barry.
And he'd be heavily targeted, and he would be repeatedly beaten. I just don't understand why that specifically. Corner is my only big issue this offseason. Why you did not restructure Jordan Brooks, give Zach Sealer a raise, but restructure him where the cap hit comes down, take the $2 and $19 million. Why you didn't do that to sign a high-end corner, knowing that teams are going to throw away from Ramsey, and whoever is the corner opposite Ramsey has to be a good player because he's going to be targeted 10 times a game. It would have been so easy to get in on any of these corners who signed early, Jonathan Jones, whole list of 32 guys, and they didn't. And I don't understand it, because next year their pass defense is going to be shredded opposite Ramsey and Kohu if they don't find anyone.
What if you get a Tre'Davious White?
Storm Duck, Cam Smith, and all the kids, even though they have intriguing talent, they're good kids. They might have NFL futures, but to go into next year relying on any of them, to me, is a huge mistake.
What about if you add a Tre'Davious White at a respectable 5? Yeah, I know you look at Barry rolling his eyes. It's respectable.
Because he's no longer good. I mean, at one point,
I didn't say any of these guys are no longer good.
Why he's bounced around so much since. I mean, he's adequate.
He's had one season bouncing around, Barry. Be fair to the guy. He's coming off an ACL injury or an Achilles. I can't remember which one it was. You don't come back immediately and be good. I am just way more patient at cornerback because I know I can find them everywhere. As I used to tell Joe Rose, I could go to Publix in Weston and find you a cornerback. I could go to Xavier Howard's house and say, Xavier, $5 million, be my best friend, come back to me. I'm not panicking, Barry. I'm not. Trust me.
On July 26th, we will have the answer on who was right. Whether you were right, if a good player shakes free and he's on their roster by late July, then you will have been right. If they have only someone mediocre or well below average on their roster opposite Ramsey and Kohu on July 26th, 27th, then I will have been right. Proof is in the pudding, baby. Proof is in the pudding.
I could go trade in August. Some team is going to be enamored with their rookie and ready to trade me their starter on a respectable deal for a 4th-round pick. Barry, I'm being patient. I'm way more concerned about the defensive line than you are, because I know Calais Campbell probably is not coming back here. I am convinced he's not coming back here. I'm sorry, I want a ring. I played 17 years in this league. Unless you promise me a job in the front office, I'm going to Baltimore. Sorry. That's just
if they allow him to leave, then I will use 2 of my favorite words. The former Dolphins PR director always laughed when I used the words unmitigated disaster. If Calais Campbell leaves, the defensive line will be an unmitigated disaster. They've left themselves in this position because they didn't get in on a bidding for Jonathan Allen or any of the other players. And I can understand them waiting on Calais, but if they were waiting on Calais,
let's not say they were in on the bidding. Let's just say that the bidding got way more.
Correct. And one thing that I want to convey is from talking to multiple agents of players who got paid this offseason, the message I got from a handful of them was the Dolphins called, they liked our player, but they weren't willing to go beyond a certain price point that was well below what many of those players ended up getting, including Greenlaw. Bosa, the money was competitive, but it's probably just as well that didn't work out because
I wouldn't do that.
$8 or $9 million in edge rusher, it was something that they couldn't afford. So, I'm with you on everything except corner. Corner's the one where I think they can wait. And with defensive line, do you think – I know you like Jonathan Allen. Do you think that if they'd gone out and spent the money on Jonathan Allen, Calais would have been less likely to return because the snaps would have been gone?
No.
Okay.
Nobody's playing over. Nobody's – I said this on Twitter, and I truly do mean it. And I think Mike McDaniel is a dead man walking if he loses Teron Armstead and he loses Calais Campbell. And I am at the point right now where I feel like both will not be returning to this team. Now, that can change. The monies can change. The offers can be enticing. And I'm not saying that both are just playing at all-pro level. Calais is certainly playing at all-pro level. But the leadership that you need from those two individuals is, in my opinion, the only thing that's going to hold this team together. And you don't have them. There's a lot of young players because you got a lot of 20-year-olds that you've added to this team, 20-year-olds who haven't done squat in the NFL. And veteran leadership, especially when you are a coach who has empowered your locker room, all of a sudden you're going to change. I don't think that happens.
Yeah, I agree with you on that front. I also don't want to understate what Armstead did on the field. He was a top 5 tackle in football last year. He gave up only 1 sack until he struggled in the Jets game because of the knee injury, and he was their best run blocker. So to me, as much as the loss is off the field because of what a tremendous leader he is, to me, it's a bigger loss on the field. Patrick Paul, you can't emerge from last season certain that he's going to be a good player. He was the worst run blocking tackle in football, according to Pro Football Focus. Small sample size, obviously. Pass blocking, obviously, was very good at Houston, but he's got to prove that he's an NFL pass blocker. We know he's a good kid. We know the effort is always high. We know he's a model citizen. We know he's got the size. He's got the reach. He's got the arm length. What we don't know is whether he can be a good NFL tackle. So it's going to be on-the-job training in all likelihood next year. I'm with you. I would say unlikely Armstead returns at this point. Senses that probably retirement. And it was very telling when McDaniel said we're operating as if he's not going to be back next year. With Calais, we'll see. It's 50-50 at this point. I know your hunch is that probably not. But to me, the loss of both of those guys on the field is the bigger issue than off, even though I get what you're saying about off field, and you're right. McDaniel's locker room suffers immeasurably without both of them in it. But on field is the other issue because who's replacing them? Patrick Paul, unproven rookie. Who's left in free agency defensive line? Who's as good as Campbell? Nobody close to him.
Exactly. Here's my reason I say this. Tua's got his own stuff to focus on and worry about. He's got to worry about the game plan and preparation. He can't worry about policing everybody. So if Armstead and Campbell are not there, who does it?
If I'm McDaniel, knowing all the problems that came to light about the tardiness, I go to the younger veterans who I can trust, who are responsible, and tell them, you need to police your teammates. I'm going to give you a name. Alec Ingold. Tell him that you are the substitute teacher. Everyone likes you. Everyone respects you. And if someone is late,
Tyreek Hill, I'm brushing Alec Ingold off like he's a flea.
No, at least from an offensive standpoint, you look at him.
No.
Jordan Brooks speaks softly, carries a big stick, as they say about Theodore Roosevelt.
Quiet guy, not
command respect. Zach Sealer, there's the perfect one, right? On offense, Alec Ingold. On defense, Zach Sealer.
Working very hard to be a better leader because of the leadership he saw from Calais. But is it in the DNA? Is it in the DNA, Barry? Somebody's going to have to. Who's going in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey's face and telling them, get in line?
Zach Sealer is a mature guy that everyone respects in the locker room because they know the effort is always there. He's maximized his career, and everyone knows he's going to always do the right things. So to me, that earns him the cred to be able to approach any teammate and say, look, we're not going to accept if you're late this year. But you're right. The question is it in his personality? Because he's a nice guy. He wants to get along with everyone. But to me, Ingold and Sealer are the guys who would need to step up in leadership, because you're right. With McDaniel, the problem is when you're going from a player's coach to let's a-hole jerk, right? That's the difficult transition. It's easier to loosen it up, right? It's easier to go the other way.
True.
Like Brian Flores in his next head coaching job, if he ever gets one, can say, I learned some things. I'm not going to be as big a jerk. I'm going to be easier on you guys, but I'm going to go back to the way I was if I see you guys not giving me full effort every day and doing what I ask you to do. To me, Omar, it's much harder to go the other way, which is what McDaniel's trying to do now.
Yeah, I don't even think it's in him. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I right now, I think Teron is leaning towards retirement, and I think Calais is. I'm sorry if I'm Calais, unless Steve Ross comes to me and says, "Hey, man, you got a job here for the rest of your life," like Alonzo Mourning. I'm going to Baltimore. So
I hope Ross does it. I mean, he's remaking the entire city of West Palm Beach. The least he can do is call Calais and tell him I'm offering you a job.
I need a call from Steve Ross myself if I'm Calais Campbell. On that note, Dolphins in Depth, we will be back next week. I will have some draft talk for you folks, unless the Dolphins go out and they sign or trade for a big name player. We're kind of shifting into draft season now, Barry, because I really think we're on the minimum level deals at this point. So unless some cornerback comes free, Barry, and they must have their eye on somebody, because this is a position where Chris Greer don't play with this position. He's not very good at drafting them, but he really addresses it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Dolphins in Depth be back next week. Again, Miami Herald podcast. You're watching Barry Jackson, Omar Kelly, and we'll see you next week.